Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get the meeting started. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We do have a quorum. Everyone is present. We welcome Director Rice back from her
Thank you.
absence.
I had to come back. It's District Clerk Week. I had to say that I'm so thankful we have a good district clerk.
Oh, didn't know that. Priorities. District Council, do you have a report from closed session for us?
A brief one. The board continued to discuss the general manager recruitment and applications received, and that process continues.
Thank you. I'll expand on that a little bit in my comments. Agenda review. Anyone have anything in the agenda? I'm going to pull item 6C because we have a representative from County Public Works here to talk about it, and I think that's a good thing. In case we have questions or anything, Mr. Acosta will be addressing us on that issue, if you want to put in a public comment or anything. All right, public safety, the sheriff's report is first.
President Pearson,
Commander Manuel. Oh.
Before we go on, I did have one thing to note.
Yes, sir.
Item 8A, that's discussion and consideration of adoption of the itemized report of water and wastewater standby or availability charges for collection on tax rolls. That won't be considered today. We had an outside printing error that made it so that we couldn't meet the noticing requirements for that item. So we're going to renotice it and consider it on the 23rd of this month.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Commander, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Michael Manueli, Commander, Sheriff's Coast Station. I'm never sure if I'm on the right date. You guys have such a full schedule. You're always meeting all the time, but I'm here today. Okay, your report is for April 2019. Calls for service for Cambria, 292 calls for service. Compared to last year, there were 278. That's up about 5%. I've noticed an increase in most calls for service across the board at the meetings that I've gone to so far this month. I don't know why, but we are seeing it up. Compared to Avila Beach, 143, Cayucas, 161, Los Osos, 493, and San Simeon, 59. Of those calls for service, Cambria generated 33 reports. Compared to last year, we had 35, so a little drop in the reports. Break those down, there were 2 calls for service regarding assault and battery. One of them, the caller declined any prosecution, and then the second call was a domestic violence type call. We had 11 disturbance calls. None of those resulted in any reports. They were violations, court order, ongoing problems with subjects creating disturbance. In fact, I heard that call go out again today as I was preparing for this meeting. A dispute resulted in the arrest of a subject for an unrelated arrest warrant. We had 2 burglary calls for service. One of those generated a report. Somebody attempted to break into a vehicle. They had punched the lock but did not steal anything. We had 7 reported thefts, 5 of those resulting in reports. We had pots and plants stolen from a porch, a theft of clothing from an unlocked vehicle, embezzlement from one of our local businesses, and packages from the back of a business that had been delivered. No vandalisms. 1 mail theft report. The person got a call from Sand City saying, hey, we have some of your mail here, stolen here, and somehow made its way up to their credit card checks. So someone was trying to get money from that person somehow. There were 3 phone scams. The one that I noted here caller identified themselves as a PG&E employee, sounded rather official, said your power's going to be shut off unless you pay the bill. Obviously, they're just trying to get money from that person. And there were 13 suspicious circumstances called. None of those resulted in reports. The only thing else I have to note is I have met, yesterday I had a chance to meet with a representative from the American Legion, and we started discussing the 4th of July and the events that will be taking place here in town, so we can be prepared for that. And that's my report for the month.
Thank you. Any questions for Sheriff?
Not so much a question, but I just wanted to know that personally I had the opportunity to obtain a phone call or receive a phone call that my eldest grandson, so identified, had taken a trip. And it got about that far and I hung up the phone. But it was kind of an interesting way to do it. It's, Grandma, it's me. Who? Your grandson. My grandson. Yes, your oldest grandson. Yeah, it was a kind of a, considering he's in South Korea right now, I finally figured out that
A very
that wasn't it.
a very popular scam, and they do it because they get money out of it. It's unfortunate. They just don't know where their grandchildren are or who's calling them, and they pay it because they love those people. They love their grandchildren, and it's unfortunate, but we see a lot of people lose money for that.
Yeah, agreed.
Obviously, these people don't do any real investigating, or they would have known they were calling a really sharp cookie who would have known just like that. I'd like to just mention, and I'm a little reluctant or ambivalent to do this, but I just happened to look at the headline in the Tribune today about the increase, I believe it was in robberies, assaults, and rapes in San Luis Obispo County. I mean, I'd still like to think that, especially here in Cambria, that we're kind of isolated from a lot of the insanity that goes on, but that was just a little bit slightly alarming to me.
I haven't read the newspaper, so I don't know if we're talking about the same one. I believe it was for San Luis City.
Oh, for the city, okay.
I believe, but I haven't seen the article, so I can't speak to it.
All right. Well, either way, it's a little bit disconcerting, but it's the times, I guess.
Like I said earlier, as I was preparing this month's stats, and I've been to Avila, San Simeon, Los Osos already this month, and I noticed an uptick in all of those reports compared to last year's, and I can't explain why.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Have a good month.
Thank you. All right, I do not see the fire chief here. So, and I don't see anybody from the Pros Commission either. Although Mr. Behringer is a alternate. No, he's not ready to do that. Okay. All right, we'll move along then. Public comment. I have 2 requests for public comment. Let's take Ms. Dickinson first, followed by Ms. Heinrichs.
Good afternoon, board, staff. Tina Dickinson, Cambria. I know that you guys are going to be talking about rate increases, and I would like to bring to your attention from the notice of proposed increase in water rates to fund an emergency water supply project, June 6, 2014. What will the rate increase pay for? The proposed rate increase will be used solely to finance an emergency water supply project on CSD property off San Simeon Creek Road. I'm not going to go any further with that because that is the crux of what I want to get to. So I went back to I keep all my CSD bills, and I went back to when that fee was first implemented, and it was on September 1st, 2014, and it included the EWS water-based charge of $13, and there was and also the EWS water use charge. Then I went to my bill of 9116, where it was no longer called the EWS, but it was changed to the SWF, and the fixed amount for the loan remained the same. But then, on November 1st of 2018, we received a $2.86 increase on the SWF water-based charge. That money, as I understood, was to go to the loan, to the lease sales agreement. In the upcoming rate increase schedule, over the 3 years, there's another increase to that. And I would like to know how this district can get away with that, because that is not what it says in the rate increase notice received in 2014, specifically for the EWS project. Why should we be paying more for a fixed loan amount through 2034? That it doesn't make it honestly. I really question it, and I will take it to Jarvis because I just don't think this is. And why is it for over 4 years it wasn't raised? And just last November, that was the first time it was raised. So I want to bring that to the board's attention before you make any decisions about rate increases. I think that needs to be looked at. I have 25 seconds. I just want to say this, that the cost of our water coming from the EWS, if it's run as proposed for 2 months, if the overall annual costs are $500,000 a year, that would amount to $5,555 an acre foot. If the overall annual costs are $1 million a year, water would be $11,111 an acre foot. Carlsbad's facility, that huge facility, is $2,500 an acre foot. We will probably are paying for the most expensive water in the world. So there you go, folks.
Thank you. Ms. Heinrichs? Sorry.
Good afternoon. Am I on? This morning I spent time at a workshop sponsored by the University of California Cooperative Extension, CAL FIRE, and some others on the gold-spotted oak borer and the invasive shot-hole borer. These sound weird, but it turns out that they are really nasty beetles that are potentially infesting trees here in San Luis Obispo County. The gold-spotted oak borer is already in Southern California and is killing oak trees. It does especially look for large, mature, healthy coast live oaks, just like we have here. It's transported in firewood. That's how it got there. That's how it's getting. So this is really a public education imperative. If we can get the word out to people not to move infested firewood around, we can stop this. Oak firewood tends to be valuable, so what happens is when a tree dies and they take it down, they cut it up, people want to use that, and unless it's specially treated or all the bark is removed, various things, it's going to bring those beetles to our oak trees. So it's a very serious situation. Invasive shot-hole borers are a little bit different. They don't actually eat the wood the way the gold-spotted oak borers do. They introduce a fungus that infects the tree, and then the beetles eat the fungus, but the fungus kills the tree. And that has already eliminated box elders from Orange County. So it's already having a very severe effect. At this meeting this morning, they had part of the Disney tree inspection team. They have had a big problem, a severe infestation at Disneyland. And so they've taken a lot of action against it. Yeah, they said Disney is famously very miserly about money, but they convinced them that this had a serious effect on the visitor experience to lose these trees. And so they have taken a very proactive stance about it. They are inspecting and monitoring their trees. There are chemical treatments for this, but that's not really the best way to go. The best way to go is to monitor the trees carefully, and at the first sign of any infestation, just spot treat those places. And because those of us who are out there looking at the trees are the ones who are most likely to see this first, and visual inspection is the best way to identify it, They are really asking for the communities to get on board to help with this. I've got a lot of materials that I got from this. I'm going to be posting them on the Forest Committee website. There are other websites that have information. If you think you have a problem, you can take a picture of it and send it through their websites, and I'll post those. One of them is gsob.org, although one of the presenters said this really should be gdsob.org. And the other is .org. I'll post those on the Forest Committee website, and that's CambriaForestCommittee.org. And anyone can contact me directly or through the website or through social media. There's a lot of information on this, but we really can do something about it. Also, last weekend, we participated in Sod Blitz, which is sudden oak death, and collected sample leaves that may have been infected. This is another, not yet, but yet for San Luis Obispo County. It's moving down from Monterey County, and this came into the country probably on nursery plants. And these are things that are invasive. They are not a problem in their home habitat, but when they get here, they just become a real serious problem. So there are a lot of strategies. There's a lot of smart people ready to help us. They said that really the best way is not to rely on government, but to look to private organizations and local organizations, because government takes too long to act. By the time CDFA gets around to it, they can have 3 or 4 generations of these beetles that have now overwhelmed the tree, whereas if you can see it and treat it, that spot, you can eradicate it. So that's the hope. And I will send to all the members of the board the links when I get them posted.
Thank you, appreciate that. On the second beetle that you were talking about?
Yeah.
Is that just attack box elders, or is that?
No, that attacks a long list of trees.
Okay.
Box elders happen to be, all of these have very strange life cycles, but it turns out that in certain cases, they overwhelm the tree and they produce so many that then they infect everything around them. And that's kind of what's happening with box elders, but oaks are also another target tree.
target, yeah.
They now have a list of over 60 species that this can infest, so.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Very good public service announcement there, really. Don't buy your firewood from out of county. Next on the agenda is board member and committee liaison reports. First one is the president's report. I have 2 things. One is I would like to recognize the staff for the work that they're doing, and particularly in the finance group and on the work on the coastal development permit. We've been briefed a lot on those and the progress being made on getting our finances in good shape, and we'll get a good presentation on that next month when the preliminary budget is presented. But I congratulate Mr. Ogren, Ms. Madrid, and Ms. Duffield on doing a great job of getting us back on course and stuff. I really think they did a great job. So the second thing is just a little update on the general manager search. We have gotten a few more resumes, and we will be talking about them in closed session this afternoon. Overall, we have the impression, based upon some phone interviews and some short interviews that we did with these people, that this crop of resumes is much better than the last crop of resumes. So we're very hopeful of coming out of this group with a viable candidate or 2, and we'll be having more extensive interviews in the next couple of weeks, we hope. So that's the latest on how the search is going for a new general manager. Next up is the Finance Committee report. Director Stidel.
Thank you. The Finance Committee was able to take a run through the wastewater treatment plant in preparation for trying to make sure that we best understand some of the implications of the CIP list and the turnkey program, the PG&E turnkey program options. It was wonderfully beneficial. John Alchin is obviously very adept at his knowledge in terms of the plant and his ability to communicate that to people as they go through. He was able to answer all of the questions that we had, and we felt that it was very beneficial to have happened. And I would certainly offer that anyone in the community who wants to gain additional knowledge of the wastewater plant and the SWF take the opportunity to take the tours that are being offered publicly. They're scheduled periodically, and the information is posted on the website. In addition to that, we've done normal committee work. One of the items in particular was the goals and objectives, which were finalized and accepted by the committee and forwarded for reference within the packet here. So I don't know whether the rest of the board has had an opportunity to take a look at those or not, but if you have by chance any feedback at this point that you'd like to be able to offer to those for revision changes or improvement, please let me know. The bylaws portion, although this copy that's in the package says corrected, I believe there may be something later than this, because there were a couple of things that I did notice in the narrative here that were, I think, either in the process of revision or had been changed more to the alignment of the bylaws that were defined and adopted by the Resources and Infrastructure Standing Committee, with the intent that the bylaws for the committees, if necessary, change for specifics of a committee, would pretty much align in the way that they operated with one another, which seemed like a practical thing to do. And the rest of that is that we will be holding a joint meeting with the Resource and Infrastructure Committee next week to discuss and talk through the CIP items in preparation for moving that information forward on the budgeting process.
Okay, very good. Anyone have any comments or questions?
I would just like to encourage Director Stidel to mention the date and time, and we encourage as many people as can make it to come to that meeting from the public and give your feedback, give your suggestions. I believe it's a.
Make sure that I record the correct time.
I believe it's a week from today. No,
it's Tuesday.
No,
Tuesday.
it's Tuesday the
My
14th, and it's from 2 until 5, if it's necessary to take that amount of time. And I believe that the reservation has been made for this room rather than the side room, so that we can accommodate as many folks from the public who can or as may want to participate. Thank you.
Great, great. I do have one comment on the bylaws that you might want to consider. Looking at the bylaws of the board, paragraphs 5 and 6, and incorporating parts of those objectives about how the directors and how the members of the standing committees comport themselves. Okay, if you would, I'd like to see some of that in there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes, Director Howell.
Since you brought up the, is this on? Can you all hear me? Yeah. The matter of the bylaws, there's some inconsistencies between the what's put forth by the Resources and Infrastructure Committee and the Finance Committee. This is probably worthy of more extensive discussion, and I'm wondering if maybe we can put that on a future agenda to bring these into, because there's differences in terms of the terms of the committee members and how vacancies should be filled, and then there's language in the infrastructure bylaws, which is not in the Finance Committee, regarding the parliamentary authority in the event that if there's matters which are not covered in our bylaws or the board's bylaws that we need to refer. So I'd like to have that discussion and bring those, or at least have the board examine those and decide, make some decisions about that.
Okay, that's fine. Policy committee hasn't looked at this at all yet, right? Or-
The policy committee's position, we didn't meet last month, but prior was we were kind of waiting on the two other committees because we had a lot of things to put together as a brand-new committee. So we thought we'd wait for the other two committees to put their bylaws together and work from that.
Okay. So why don't you guys?
I will mention that the discussion that I had about the alignment was in alignment to the R&I subcommittee. What this represented was an alignment to your prior revision before this last one came, and so there was some overlap in time, and there really isn't an issue relative to the period of time nor the inclusion of some of the things that you've mentioned. So I think that you'll find that the resulting document will be in alignment with what you've adopted.
That's kind of my impression, but it does sound like it's sort of a work in progress, and maybe it is appropriate to have the policy committee kind of review that and come back, because there may be stuff we hadn't thought about, or perhaps there's stuff which is not considered appropriate. It would be good to know.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
if the policy committee could take that up at their next meeting and look at what they've got and
Sure.
deal with that. Great.
So we'll get the drafts of their bylaws and take a look and see what we can.
Okay. All right, thank you for the good report. Next up is the policy committee, so Director Rice.
The policy committee did not have a quorum last month, so we did not meet. We may meet before our regular May meeting, but at this point, I think we're just going to have our regular May meeting, because then everybody will be in town and we can move forward. So nothing to report, really.
Okay, great. Director Howell, report on the Resources and Infrastructure Committee.
Yes, it's behind the podium there, sorry. So if you don't mind,
That's fine.
Vice President Dean.
Vice President Dean.
Hi. Our committee had a very busy month since our last report to the board. We had our third wastewater treatment plant tour. This one was well attended by members of the Finance Committee, as Director Stidel mentioned. Okay. The tour focused on the electrical upgrades needing to be done, as well as many of the other repairs and upgrades throughout the facility. And we discussed what projects could possibly be done through the PG&E SST program. We followed the path from the inflow of the wastewater to the plant all the way through to the final treated effluent ready to go to the percolation ponds. It was a very informative and interesting tour, and hopefully there'll be more of those so people can go. We also held a tour of the water treatment facility. We got to look inside those mysterious cargo containers, and we followed the steps through from the 9P7 source water to the final treated product water ready to be re-injected. That was attended by about 5 people, I believe. We had an ad hoc committee meeting on CIP priority. The ad hoc committee consisted of Chairman Howell, Paul Nugent, and myself. We met with John Elchin, Monique Madrid, Melissa Bland at the wastewater treatment plant. We went through the CIP projects line by line. We discussed their urgency, how they related to each other, what would be covered under the PG&E SST program, and what could either not wait or could not be done or could be done by the district itself. We then met with Jim Green and went through and reprioritized the CIP projects for water and the EWS-SWF in much the same manner. We had our committee meeting on Tuesday, May 7th. All committee members were present, as well as interim GM Pravo Ogren.
Management Analyst Melissa Bland, Wastewater Treatment Plant Supervisor John Alchin, Water Department Supervisor Jim Green, and over a half dozen members of the community whose attendance and participation were very helpful and greatly appreciated. We received a newly updated version of the PG&E preliminary assessment in which there were some revisions of language and addition of information involving savings for the district. This revision of the preliminary energy assessment was a joint effort by John Elchin, Melissa Bland, and Brent Patera of PG&E. We also received the updated and newly prioritized copy of the wastewater treatment plant CIP list. We had a discussion regarding the SST program investment grade audit and how it would relate to the wastewater treatment plant CIP priority list at great length, and we moved to forward that proposal on to the Finance Committee. We then discussed the priorities on the newly updated CIP list for wastewater, the projects that were underway at this point, what's included in the proposal, and what needs to be done outside of that program. We moved to forward this revised list as well, with an exception noted for an unexpected emergency to the Finance Committee. We received the updated and newly prioritized water CIP list for discussion. The top priorities discussed were the temporary pipe across the pedestrian bridge, the SCADA system, and water meter replacements. We also heard a report from Jim Green on the water main break on Warwick 2 weeks ago. The committee moved to forward the approved water CIP list as updated with an exception for an emergency priority onto the Finance Committee. The updated SWF CIP list was next. Top priorities were short-term modifications to facilitate off-hauling the remainder of the brine waste and the purchase of 2 new tanks and related containment, grading, and rock for future brine waste storage and haul-off. Mr. Green, I just lost my place, sorry. Mr. Green also gave us an update on the progress of the impoundment, emptying, and closure, which I believe will be included in the manager's report. The committee moved to approve this updated CIP list as written, with the exception of a possible emergency onto the Finance Committee. There will be a joint meeting of the Finance and Resource and Infrastructure Committees to pass on and discuss the CIP recommendations. As previously noted, this meeting will be held here at the Vets Hall Tuesday, May 14th at 2 o'clock, and the public's encouraged to attend and participate. There will also be a tour for the public of the EWS SWF tomorrow, Friday, May 10th at 10:30. It will be an informative and interesting tour, and we encourage folks to participate. There's a form now on the CCSD website to register, or you can call the CCSD office to get on the list at 805-927-6223. I'd also like to remind the public, if you were not able to attend the committee meetings, that the audio recording of these meetings is posted on the agenda page for each of these committees, usually by the end of the day or the following morning after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good report. Anything to add, Director Howell?
Oh, just to emphasize to all of our friends that are watching that these tours are really interesting, and we do plan on having them regularly, but nevertheless, I recommend people get out there and look, especially before we start talking about the next year's budget. I think it would certainly add interest to that discussion if people could go out and see what we're really talking about. So the tours will be, Monique and I have been discussing, and the general manager and I have been discussing making these a regular thing that can happen on a regular schedule, and because we really do want the people to be very clear about what's going on. And the other thing is, again, to extend an invitation to the public to please, please, please come to these subcommittee, these standing committee meetings. This is your opportunity to actually communicate not only with board members, but with the staff and the management of the district. And it's something that the public has been asking for, and we make this available, and we would really, it does my heart good when I see a lot of people coming to these meetings. It makes me feel that we're really doing the right thing. So I really encourage people to come. You will be listened to. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Director Rice.
Can I just get a clarification. So you want the policy committee to look at the bylaws from the other two committees. Do you want us to be reconciling them, making our comments on them, and providing those comments to the board? I just wanted some clarity on what you expect.
I think the best thing would be to bring your recommendations back, and I think Director Howe's right. We
So
can have a
on
general
changes,
discussion,
maybe?
But, yeah.
Okay,
And then, I don't think they have to be identical, okay?
Okay.
But they need to be in tune with each other, so to speak.
Okay.
So as long as they're that way, I think your committees should be able to move forward with their own bylaws. Yeah.
absolutely. And then I just had a procedural question, I guess. Since we don't currently have bylaws for the committees, Mr. Carmel, are we essentially running under the board's bylaws, or what's the protocol at this point, since we don't have specific committee?
They're not legally required, so at this point, you're just sort of
Okay.
free-floating.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Before we get to other reports, I was amiss in not seeing that Ms. Dickinson would like to speak on this item, so Ms. Dickinson?
Thank you, President Pearson. First of all, in regard to John Alchin, and as Director Steidel said, that he's very adept, he's able to answer all your questions, and certainly as a Tech 4 in wastewater, I've heard nothing but glowing remarks about Mr. Alchin since pretty much he came on board in staff. My question, and I've raised this many times over the years, why is it that we do not have a utility supervisor, that one I would believe would be Mr. Alchin, coming to regular, once a month, board meetings to give a report as utility supervisor to the entire community, with AGP taping it so that those folks, even folks who couldn't come today, said, oh, I'm going to watch it live streaming. We need an expert coming to this podium, just like we have the fire chief and as we have the commander from the sheriff's department and anybody else. That person needs to be here. And I'm going to request again that the board consider whoever it may be, Mr. Alchin or Mr. Green, but someone, or alternate them, I don't know, but I think they need to be here. Now, last night, I attended the San Simeon Community Services District meeting, as did Director Rice, and I actually thought you were going to report on that today. Okay, I didn't hear it in committee reports. It came to my attention when I was going through their agenda, and I saw item 5E, business action item, discussion and direction to staff regarding the formation of an ad hoc committee related to regional infrastructure. Summary: as part of the after-fact coastal development CDP for San Simeon, for the riprap located at the wastewater treatment plant, County Supervisor Gibson contacted San Simeon Services District staff suggesting to contact the general manager of Cambria to discuss regional wastewater treatment infrastructure. I asked if that had occurred, and they said no, they were waiting. The president said, no, we're waiting to hear back from Cambria. I think both Amanda and I may have been a little surprised about that. So during the October Coastal Commission hearing, Supervisor Gibson mentioned after San Simeon withdrew their application, he mentioned a regional interagency wastewater treatment plant. He included in as the agencies, state parks, Hearst Castle, because 25% of San Simeon's waste comes from Hearst Castle, San Simeon, and Cambria. Well, it was a very unusual and really quite strange meeting, and especially I think on this item. It turned out that they ended up tabling the item because the board president seemed rather confused. She asked Director Rice if Cambria was going to form their own committee, or was there going to be a joint committee. It was quite remarkable, actually, and I think in how unprepared they were to go forward with this. So they tabled it, and I don't know if that's coming up, if I heard correctly, next month or some other time. But I took extensive notes on it, and because they do not have AGP, but they have somebody taping it, so you have to kind of check the tape out from the district if you want to see it. However, they do, their directors would like to come and take a tour of our wastewater facility, and Director Rice reminded them that only 2 could come at a time so that they weren't violating the Brown Act. I guess Director Rice can add to that whatever she wishes, but it was a rather interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so should we let Director Rice go first? Thank you.
Tina gave a lot of the report. There was an item on the agenda regarding having San Simeon put together a committee. They did have fairly extensive discussion about who would be part of that committee and talked about whether they'd be working with us. In the end, I think they determined that it's essentially premature because we don't even know what's meant by a regional project at this point. So this regional project that was mentioned by Supervisor Gibson at the Coastal Commission meeting, where the San Simeon permit was being, and enforcement action was being considered, not even really clear what that is. And so I had suggested that our staff and the San Simeon staff look at what does that mean? What's a regional project that we could do that would help our communities both in some way? And we're not even to that point yet. So what I'd like to try and do today, as long as we have a board consensus, is to have our staffs look into what potential benefits there could be in having a regional project, because there are some potential benefits if they're permittable by the regulatory agencies and affordable in terms of what the districts can actually handle financially. So it's still in the very high concept phase of the project, and this is just the very beginning of what could be a very short or very long process that will involve lots of community input and coordination between the 2 communities. So I think that having further discussions to find out what we could do, because we have issues that we might be able to address with a coordinated effort with San Simeon, as well as they have issues with having to move their wastewater plant. And so I don't think it requires any action at this time, other than if there's a consensus on the board to look into what that might mean, a regional project.
I'm wondering if we shouldn't get a definition of what Mr. Gibson's really talking about first.
I think that's exactly what I'm suggesting that we do.
Okay. Mr. Ogren, would you like to contact the supervisor and try to get some ideas to what he's talking about?
Yes, in fact, he reached out to me, and my feedback to him was that we would look forward to San Simeon contacting us. And I understand that their engineer was going to do that. Charlie, whose last name Grace, yeah, was going to reach out to us. So it sounds like there might have been a little bit of difference of thoughts at the meeting last night in terms of them thinking we were going to reach out to them.
Well, and all of this kind of came up when we were without a GM, when we didn't even have an acting GM when it first came up, so.
Oh, back in October?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have reached out, and I'll be glad to contact Mr. Gibson and Supervisor Gibson and follow up with it as well and find out if Mr. Grace is actually going to reach out to us.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So this may become a future agenda item, but we need more staff. It's preliminary either way.
Yeah, I agree. Director Howell.
I think we do need to be clear again to the public that we are not proposing this. We are simply looking at it. Everyone needs to be very clear about that. This is not being proposed at this time and may never be proposed until we have a look. So people don't need to worry. There are no
We don't even know what it
nefarious
is
plans
right now.
here.
No.
Yeah, it's just we want to know what's up.
Very pie in the sky, as they say, yes. Thank you. Yeah. All right. I think it's the Vice President's turn.
Yeah,
Mr. Farmer?
personally, I prefer lemon meringue if it's going to happen, but a little tang to it, you know. So the first thing I'm going to do is report from last night's Forest Committee meeting. A number of items were discussed. Initially, we talked about the need to address further weed removal from downtown, especially along Main Street, the medians in Main Street, and along the sidewalks. And so it was just briefly discussed, and then a little bit later on in the meeting, there was a lengthier discussion as to why we can't get volunteer groups to address this area that's been neglected that people complain about, but nobody does anything about. I shouldn't say nobody, but fewer and fewer organizations are becoming involved in something that's about, you know, making our community look more attractive to the folks that live here and the folks who visit here. There's also perhaps considering investigating grant funding from the Cambria Community Council for promoting forest health projects, and this is going to be on the agenda for next month. With regard to the Earth Day Fair, and there were a few of us from the board here that actually attended, and it was the weather was great, the music was great, the food was really good. Attendance was a little bit down, and that's basically because it happened on Easter Sunday, and there were other events taking place in the community and elsewhere, and that's probably why. One of the things that Green Space endeavored to do was sell these crates of seedlings so people could plant, could nurture them at home, and then plant these seeds throughout the community of Cambria, especially in the forested areas, come next fall. And hopefully this will be taking place. They're hoping to plant 10,000 trees this fall, so hopefully that will happen. Also, another quick item came up with regard to fire hazard fuel reduction guidelines, and I think it was suggested that Fern Canyon be seen as more of a special project due to the fact that it's a wetlands and not just a forest itself, if that's understanding the difference there. Also, there was a discussion about perhaps getting the county involved in the removal of thistle along the roadways, and that would be in county area. And anybody that lives here in Cambria knows that 15 years ago there was hardly any thistle, and now it's like everywhere. And that's kind of, well, it is what it is, right? There was also a lengthy discussion regarding the increase in tree removal that's taking place in town without county permits and no tree planting taking place to compensate for the cutting down of those trees. And there were other brief items, but I think that that's pretty much what happened last night. With regard to reporting from the Friends of the Fiscalini Ranch Preserve, one of the problematic issues here is that the FFRP meetings take place tonight. So I'm actually reporting on the meeting that took place a month ago. And then next time that I do this report, it'll be for the meeting that takes place this evening, which is kind of awkward in the scheme of things, if you can understand that. So here we go. There's a variety of different items that also took place at the FFRP meeting. So first thing I want to bring up is that the volunteer work that's going on over at the dog park, which of course we spent over $300,000 in developing. So you might want to know, well, what's going on there? Well, first off, staff has been weed whacking there. We can, especially around the exterior area, we can thank Carlos for doing that. One of the things that's happening is that water jugs are being removed or stolen, I guess you could say, from the dog park. And so a community member, Tim Roach, has purchased new ones on his own and has labeled them dog park property. Also, there are more volunteers involved in providing, water for the dog park and cleaning up, but more oversight is needed, and there's hoping that maybe there'll be a volunteer group that get together to help keep the dog park tidy. Also, there's a billboard has been provided by it was purchased and provided by dog park volunteers that's been set up by the CCSD so people can understand more about the dog park. Also, a report on something that I mentioned last month is that the FFRP, the cost of dealing with the homeless encampments, initially the cost was felt to be between $20,000 and $40,000. It was ultimately determined it was roughly $10,000, and of course the district is doing that. Carlos and his staff are breaking down and removing the trash that is there, and the FFRP made a motion and approved a motion with much discussion, pro and con, that they donated $5,000 to the $10,000 cost, and they'd like to be more involved in what takes place on the ranch in a variety of different ways. Also, one of the things that came up, this is probably very important, is that the financial issues of FFRP are somewhat challenged right now. They're anticipating that perhaps there might be a budget shortfall this year and next with regard to how much financial capital they have available to do whatever that needs to be done. So the suggestion was to take money out of their reserves and put it in other areas that need tending to. Also, that inflation is some way affecting. They get their money from, what do you call it, endowments, and they're involved with various organizations that accumulate financial capital, and they're not doing all that well, so they're looking at other areas to pursue. Also, I just want to mention that FFRP folks are involved with the grammar school and Leffingwell, and the children there, the youngsters, especially at Leffingwell, have become very involved with regard to what's going on at the ranch, and that seems very encouraging, the young people wanting to do that, and also efforts at the middle school are taking place as well. And then finally, I believe this is finally, at Sandy Zelli, and was a grant, and as a result, there's a Spanish, what do I want to call this? Brochure, thank you, I have it written down right here. So there's this brochure in Spanish, and it's become very popular. A number of the members of the Hispanic community have picked this up. It's really cool. It looks just like the one printed in English with the great photos and class presentation, but it's in Spanish. And so we're hoping that more and more people of the Hispanic community will be involved, especially in taking their children out to the ranch. I believe that's all I wanted to give for that. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you for that report. Yes, Director Rice.
Director Farmer, Vice President Farmer, maybe it would feel less disjointed if you could tell people what's also on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Do you know what's on the agenda? Maybe for next month for your report, that might be helpful. Then folks could know if they wanted to go, if they're watching live.
Well, it's not like I don't have a lot of items here in front of me. So this evening, the agenda for this evening, in regular business, there's going to be, once again, the usual very efficient report from Ranch Manager Carlos Mendoza, the Executive Director's report from the soon-to-be retiring Joe Ellen Butler, who has been the only Executive Director of the FFRP, more of an update on the ranch survey, which, and then the endowment enhancement that is kind of talked about, and then various committee reports, and then they're going to have a closed session on the Executive Director search and another item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Vice President Farmer. I have one report from the Fire Safe Focus Committee that met yesterday. The Fire Safe Focus Committee will be having a wildfire preparedness meeting, town hall, if you would, sometime in July. And we're trying to line up a couple of things for that. One of them would be emergency preparedness for what you should be ready for the wildfire. But also, we are expecting a report on the evacuation study that the Cal Poly people are doing for us under a grant The first phase of that will be done at the end of June, and we should be able to get the report given to us in July for the entire community to see. And the area that they did the study on is Lodge Hill. So all those of you who live in Lodge Hill and you want to know how long it's going to take you to get out of town, when the evacuation thing happens, you need to come to that meeting because it'll be very, very instructive. I went to a meeting with this Professor Nuoso, and his computer model that he uses and massages to get the study done properly was very, very detailed, and I think it'll give us a really good idea as to how long it's going to take to evacuate some places. We have another grant in progress to do the entire town, including San Simeon. And when we get that funding, we'll have the doctor continue with his work and have the full report. And with that, we'll be able to then ask the county to help us out with evacuation routes and apply for grants and that kind of thing, because then we'll have solid basis for going forward with that. So that's my report from the Fire Safe Council. Thanks. All right. Moving along, we're now with the manager's report, and Ms. Dickinson requested time.
President Pearson,
Sorry.
I was going to suggest maybe we could go to the consent agenda since we have somebody here for that
Sure.
part of the.
Yeah, we could do that, skip over.
If that's okay with the board
Yep, we could do that.
and the general manager.
All right. So we pulled one item from the consent agenda. Item number 6C. Would Mr. Ogren like to present that? And then we have a report from a county official.
As a consent agenda, as originally scripted consent agenda item, I don't have a prepared presentation, but 6C is for the right-of-way agreement, easements, and consent to common use with the County of San Luis Obispo for the Burton Drive slip-out repair project. Mr. Phil Acosta, the right-of-way agent for County Public Works, is here. One of the prior board questions or comments to staff was whether the project would also reestablish the pedestrian access. We have confirmed with the county that that is the case. I looked at the plans, and even though I'm not an engineer, I could identify how that was incorporated in the plans, and I think at this time it would be good to hear from Mr. Acosta.
Very good. Mr. Acosta, please.
Good afternoon to the Board of Directors and to the CSD officers. Phil Acosta, right-of-way agent for the County Department of Public Works. I thank you to Mr. Ogren for his summary on agenda item 6C. County has requested a permanent easement and a temporary construction easement for a slope repair project. This is a federal aid project, and so we have followed all the federal guidelines, including a notification letter for our appraisal, an actual appraisal, and then an offer, et cetera. And so we have presented our offer, and then we also updated our offer once it became known that there was a 10-inch CSD water line going through the requested easement area. So we have made some adjustments to our agreement for that. That's why we call it an easement and consent to common use agreement now. Otherwise, we have a permanent easement and a temporary construction easement over the facility, and we do intend to protect the district's facilities in place during use of that temporary construction easement. And yes, in fact, the pedestrian path is being reconstructed as part of the project using decomposed granite, and it is represented in the plans. One of the reasons I did want to just have a moment to speak today is I noticed that the right-of-way agreement and the deed document show Director Rice as the board president, and we've corrected those signature pages to show Mr. Pearson as board president. And so I'll present those to Monique Madrid. Also, I did want to note that it does show Monique Madrid as acting general manager. If there's any reason to change that, we can do that with a simple paste over if we need to correct that. So, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir.
Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Acosta?
I have a question. So you're doing, the pedestrian access is one of the things I had written down, but the pedestrian access, I'm assuming will be blocked during the construction period, is that the case?
Yes,
But we would still have access if we need to do work there, yes?
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because I know that this, I don't know if it's this exact spot, but I know that we do have a lift station or a pump station in that area that was part of
right
the
there.
local hazard
Right there.
mitigation plan as part of, this could be a problem. So I just want to make sure that the district is protected in case something crazy were to happen. And I'm not a lawyer, so looking through these documents, I couldn't tell. I'm sure that you've reviewed them, and we wouldn't be looking at them for approval, but.
We went over them carefully. Yes, if we have the need to go in there and do work, we have the right to do it.
And they're not gonna drill a hole into our 10-inch pipe or anything. Okay. I don't think so either. I just want to make sure that we're protected. And like I said, I'm assuming that it wouldn't be before the board without your review of it.
I would like to say that we are working to try to get the project under construction this summer construction season. If, however, it is delayed for funding or construction purposes, we are requesting a 2-year temporary construction easement, so that would cover us in the event that it gets delayed. But we have indicated in the right-of-way agreement that we would notify the district as we're preparing for construction so that we can put our resident engineer in contact with district personnel as needed, so that if in the event that we need to coordinate access to the facility, we can do that. So
That'd be terrific. So you have not put this out for bid or anything then yet?
not yet, no.
Okay, okay, very good. So you're a ways down the road still, okay. Thank you. All right, Director Howell.
Thank you. So I wanted to get clear on the time constraint, if I may, Mr. Acosta. Let me explain why I'm asking you this question. Clearly, the project needs to be done. There's no question about that. And as far as I can tell from reading the documents, everyone's intentions are pure, but there are a couple of things that do concern me. I just went there today to look to make sure I understood what was it. It's an extremely crowded spot. I really have trouble seeing how this is going to be done without disturbing either our lift station or our generators or the other stuff that's there. So it's going to be a challenge. There's no question about that. And it'll be a challenge both for access once the construction commences, because as there's verbiage in here talking about vehicles being left there, construction supplies. It's in a very, very crowded spot. I have visions of us having to get into that lift station with a Vector truck or something and not being able to do it. So, so there's a couple of, in view of that, then there's certain difficulties. So I have some problems. There's some language in the documents which appear to me to be contradictory. And while it is clearly the county's intention that the district will be left whole after all this is done, I do, however, see some verbiage that I'd like to have our council look at in greater detail. The other thing which I would like is I know it is the intent to reconstruct the pedestrian path, but there is no recitation other than the map. So I would like that included in the document as well. So I'm not prepared at this time to approve this without having an additional exam. Now I can go through exactly all the problems I'm having, but I don't know if this is the time or place to do that. If we can put this off until and vote on it next month, that would give me time to make sure the language is clean and that these concerns are taken care of. So that's my position. Would you care to, do we have time to do that?
The county is attempting to construct this project this season.
Right, I
and
understand
this is
that.
one of the items that could delay it till next year. So it would be nice to get the slope reconstructed before the next rainy season. That is one of the
Indeed.
concerns.
So if we were to prove this in, where are we now? This is April? If we were to
May.
approve the, we're in
We're
May,
in
sorry.
May.
If we were to approve this in June, that would be too late for the county to move forward?
That could possibly jeopardize the construction
Yeah, for
season.
this year, for sure.
Director
Mm.
Howell, perhaps we could just continue this to the 23rd?
That would
This
be, and
month,
then you and I can
you and I
talk,
can
and
get
maybe
together.
I'll be happy, and that'll be fine.
That'll work.
I like that idea.
Okay,
So,
do I have a motion to continue item 6C?
I would so move.
Okay,
I'll second
Second.
that.
all right. Moving to second, can we have a roll call on item 6C, please?
I just have a little tiny further discussion before we vote. Can we also look at like alternative routing for pedestrians? There's some people in town that's one of their main ways of getting around, and I know I don't
that's
like
true.
walking up and down Burton, but I think if they can't get through that
Well,
one section.
Currently, it's gone. There's no pedestrian
But there's
path
people
at
that
all.
are still walking, they're still walking down there, and so with a fence up, I mean, just to look at, that's all.
It would say that the pedestrians are being, they do have access up on the roadway itself, and
Yeah.
that is temporary. That would be perpetuated during construction.
Okay.
They would not completely block pedestrian access. It would be a detour,
Yeah.
so to speak,
Yeah,
and then put back on the walkway once it is reconstructed.
yeah.
Yes. And I
That's
did
another
wanna-
reason
I-
to get it done as soon as possible, because that's a
Right.
real safety consideration for those people.
I did want to point out on the temporary construction easement and the use of the facility for purposes of estimating the cost of the project and putting the project out to bid, we have to show a temporary construction easement area. However, that does not prevent a bidder from seeking a temporary construction easement elsewhere. For instance, on the True Value Hardware property right next door, if they see a need to supplement what the county has purchased. This temporary construction easement is simply to enable the project and put it out to bid, and any number of contractors would bid on the project and probably go knocking on doors, probably next door, and make arrangements for an additional temporary construction easement area. So what you see on paper and on the plans is simply one method of feasibility, and that typically gets supplemented by those that are bidding on that would bid on the contract.
Okay, very good. You're good? Everybody good?
I'd just like to ask a couple of
Sure,
brief questions. You were talking about hoping to initiate this coming summer. I'd just like something a little bit more specific as to how long this project would take. And also, are there going to be times when people and vehicles are going to be on Burton Drive during this process, and therefore it's going to be narrowed down to one lane going each way? I believe Director Howell already addressed his concern with regard to this, because that's probably one of the most sensitive driving areas, especially during vacation time, tourist season.
Right. To my knowledge, there are no plans to completely close Burton Drive. There would be times when it's constricted down to one lane, but they do anticipate doing the primary construction from the shoulder area and out of the traveled way. But yes, there are times when it's going to be temporarily closed or delayed.
And do you have any idea from the initial time that the project starts to when it would end? 1 month, 2 months?
So we put into the right-of-way agreement, provision 5 of the agreement, where it says, understood that by the parties, the county anticipates an active project construction period of approximately 6 months. The reason why we've requested and are purchasing a 2-year temporary construction easement is, as I mentioned before, is a possible delay in the project. But the actual construction period should be 6 months or less.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Okay,
Director Rice?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
aye. We'll now consider the rest of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda?
Also move.
I'd like to bring up just a couple of,
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Then we can discuss.
oh, thank you.
I'll second it.
Okay, very good. Yes, Vice President Farmer.
I just want to make a couple of comments on, first off, did we finish with the general manager's report?
No.
No, we skipped over that.
Going back to that, okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Ogren. So I have a couple of questions with regard to the expenditure report. And let me find that real quick. So on page 46, down towards the bottom, Farallon Incorporated, professional services for the SWF, and there's two items there, one through March 29th of this year, and the other one through September 28th of this year. So I guess my two questions are, first off, or more than two questions, who is Farallon Incorporated? What are these costs for? And why are we paying for services that haven't been given yet?
I can answer that. They're our consulting expert in this CDM Smith litigation, so that's why they're in there. They were a little significantly more expensive this month because there were some test wells drilled, some 1 foot test wells drilled, piezometer wells, about 15 feet deep to do some water testing, water level testing that were needed to contradict some of CDM Smith's theories specifically.
Okay. They're theories. All right, thank you. So also, I noticed on page 50, Rutan and Tucker Professional Services, $9,700. That's also for the SWF.
They're the outside counsel representing us in the case.
Right. So I just wanted to point out that it's our good fortune this year, whereas last year, pretty much every month that we had the expenditure report, the amount of ratepayers' monies being spent on the emergency water facility was usually 6 figures. So far this year, we've had a number of times when it's not only been just 5 figures, but even below $50,000, which is a good thing. I want to point out that the amount of money this month is, I believe, just under $27,000, but $18,000 of that is for legal fees. So I thought the community might be interested in the pros and the cons of the monies being spent this month. Thank you.
I did want to point out those fees are recoverable at the end of the litigation, assuming we win, which we will.
Which we will.
Okay.
We'll keep our fingers crossed. 2 thumbs up. Thanks.
Yes, Director Howell.
Just a quickie. This is actually, just to note, the credit card this month, the amount is down to $1,900, which is way, way, way less than it was before. So I just wanted to compliment somebody on their restraint on the use of the credit card. That's something that has been catching people's eye in the past, but so I wanted to be sure that if folks had missed that this time it looks like my credit card bill is a little more reasonable.
So I have been working with staff that have credit cards. Can you hear me? I've been working with the staff that do have credit cards, and there's only a few in the district, and we've been trying to identify vendors that maybe we can establish an account with so that we're not having to purchase these things via the credit card each time. So we have opened about 4 new accounts, so that could be also a reason why you're seeing a reduction in costs.
I figured it was due to some efforts there. I just wanted to compliment that it seemed to be headed in the right direction, and I want to make sure everyone sees that, because sometimes they only see the other stuff that stick out, you know, where this number doesn't look very big at all, so it could easily miss. So thank you, Pam.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote then.
Oh, I had a slip in and you called my name and then Director Rice interrupted. I had a slip on 5A.
5A, yes, that's the general manager's report. We're on the consent agenda still, Tina.
Oh, I thought you went back to.
No, we'll get there. We'll get there. You're moments away.
Director Stidel? Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Rice?
I abstain. I was not here to approve the minutes.
Vice President Farmer,
Sure, why not?
President Pearson.
Aye. All right. Before we get to the general manager's report, I have two other things. It was brought up that I didn't mention when the Fire Safe Focus meetings are, and they are once a month. The next meeting is on June the 12th, which is a Wednesday at 3 p.m. And unless the fire station is fixed, which I doubt it will be here at the Vets Hall. So the Vets Hall, June 12th, 3 o'clock, Fire Safe Focus Group. And I understand we have a special guest here. Ms. Dean, would you like to introduce this lady, person?
Hi, I'd like to introduce the community to Green Space's new Executive Director, Andrea Wogslin.
Very good. Welcome.
Tell them where you're from. And she's new to Cambria, so I just kind of wanted her to introduce herself.
Why, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be in this area. I've spent last couple of decades actually working with land trusts and in the environmental movement, but I have a background working with conservation-driven investing firms, kind of in conjunction, so kind of taking a conservation ethic to development. And I'm excited to learn more about the various activities that the community is involved in and kind of the way that we can work together and how it overlaps. So far, so good. And I'm glad that you enjoyed the Earth Day event. That was my introduction to the community. So kind of a crash course, certainly some environmental speed dating going on. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we'll now move on to the general manager's report. And first, let's have a public comment from Ms. Dickinson.
Thank you, President Pearson. Sorry, I was confused.
You weren't alone. You weren't alone.
Okay, so in the general manager's report, a couple of things, general manager. On the second and third bullet points, follow up on the regular coastal development permit for the sustainable water facility. That doesn't tell me anything. I'd like you to elaborate further on that. Where are we? What still needs to be done? Or as far as the application, does anything else have to be added to make that complete? That would be one question I'd have. The third bullet point, the follow-up on the notice of violation, and I caught this at the very end of the last meeting when I was watching it. It was when you guys were talking about agenda review, and you talked about this, and I did a lot of research on it. I was in touch with Jeff Densmore, and we've been back and forth, and I was very confused about, it mentioned in the report, December, for the month of December 2018, no specific date was given, and they also said in that citation, and the month of January, which Ms. Madrid pointed out in the last meeting, April 18th. So, first of all, what I asked him for was the actual date, which was December 13th, when this violation took place. Then I went to the monthly production reports, daily production, and I looked to see what was produced from SR3, and it was 30,000 gallons that was included in our monthly production. So apparently this was some sort of automated system, that there was an error. However, I would like to have more than just follow-up, because the notice of violation doesn't even say who the NOV was generated from. The violation occurred here, but was it how would people know if it was the DDW or the regional board? I think we need a little bit more clarity in addressing the general manager's report. So if you could give us a little bit more information. I think I have been pretty much caught up to date, but I don't think the public has. And certainly on the CDP, no, I don't think the public is aware. Certainly I'm not. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
President.
General Manager Ogren.
Certainly good questions, and I was prepared to speak to those. Before doing so, I do want to report on Chief Hollingsworth. He was not able to attend today. Got a text message. There was a boat swimmer rescue off of Leffingwell, and at first they were in the middle of it, but the update was that it was a confirmed capsized boat, no victims, and the rescue boat is returning. So it appears that that ended well, at least. With my approach to the general management report, and certainly additional board feedback is always welcome, but given my relative time constraints as the general manager right now, my approach is to do the bullet points and then to follow up with the verbal statements. And so I'm going to hit on some of the highlights, and I'll go to the regular coastal development permit and the notice of violation first. And so on the regular coastal development permit, certainly there is a lot of work still to be done on that. And I've met with county staff. I have had phone conversations with coastal staff. I've met with regional board recently, as well as some of our consultants, legal counsel, and I feel relatively well that I'm getting my arms around the various issues associated with the coastal development permit, the regular coastal development permit. I don't have specifics to report out today, but what I am anticipating is that in part of the recommendations are to have some community discussions prior to actually taking the next steps associated with having your board approve a project description for which we then want to have the coastal development permit approved. The supplemental environmental impact report, of course, was done quite some time ago, but we still need to define what is it in terms of the project description and the actions. And given the numerous issues associated with it, what I think would be appropriate, and whether it's discussed now or under future agenda items, is an introduction, not immediately, but probably right at the beginning of next fiscal year, to your board with maybe the 30,000-foot flyover, and then perhaps, if it meets your board's pleasure, to start working through some of the detailed discussions at the Resource and Infrastructure Committee. Certainly what I've found in meeting with the standing committees, we are having good dialogue with community representatives, and certainly that would be beneficial for my work efforts in developing recommendations to your board on how to proceed with the regular coastal development permit. Inherently in formal meetings like this, public input is important, but the ability to have the dialogue with the public is, due to the formalities, a little bit more constrained than what we have at the standing committee meetings. So that's the general approach. I've had a lot of good dialogue so far. I feel like I'm getting my arms around the various issues and understanding that there are numerous, and would be prepared early next fiscal year to again give your board a sort of the big picture flyover and then work at the committee level before coming back to your board with final recommendations on how to proceed. Generally speaking, and as far as timing goes, if we're able to provide recommendations to your board that you could feel comfortable approving in the August, September timeframe, then there's a possibility we might be able to be on the Planning Commission's agenda by the end of the calendar year. And then when we walk through the various appeal steps that are possible here, if it is Planning Commission near the end of this calendar year, or maybe even the beginning of next calendar year, the Board of Supervisors then would follow that, perhaps the first half of 2020. Assuming it goes to Coastal Commission, their first step is a substantial issues hearing, which, all things considered, again, I think that would be relatively likely, latter part of 2020. And then that leads to the de novo hearings, which Coastal then opens all issues up for consideration. And that's where there's a lot of questions and answers that we would be working through with Coastal staff prior to the Coastal Commission's de novo hearing, and that might then be in 2021. So again, I think that we can anticipate really good community discussions in the mid to latter part of this summer in order to try to identify and develop recommendations on how we walk through and sequence the various issues associated with the coastal development permit. With respect to the notice of violation, it is with the Division of Drinking Water, so it's I could and should have identified DDW in this, and certainly they recognize that they had inconsistencies on whether it was a December 2018 or a January notice violation, and to confirm again, it was a reporting on December 13th. I participated with Mr. Green in a follow-up conversation with Jeff Densmore, and we expect to get correspondence in order to close the issue in the very near future. Previously, when I indicated a possible future agenda item, then we would like to close the case with Mr. Densmore before providing our final report. I would say that the conversation went well. Their original notice of violation was a concern regarding a water quality violation. And during the discussions and the review that both Melissa Bland and Mr. Green followed up with Jeff Densmore and his staff, the confirmation was that it was not an actual water quality violation to the community. In their original notice of violation, they directed us to send a notice to the community, and they have verbally rescinded that requirement because they recognized that rather than a water quality violation, they think it's a reporting mistake, reporting issue. And so we had follow-up discussion, or during that discussion with Mr. Densmore, as well as I had follow-up discussions with the regional water board separately on our regulatory reporting to both of the agencies. And consistent with the report that I gave to you at the last meeting regarding the need to improve quality controls within the district, certainly the regulatory reporting is a high priority, and all staff recognizes that. And so, again, it's important to confirm that the violation was not based on distributing water that did not meet water quality requirements, but instead was an error in reporting. And I believe we're all on the same page with that in terms of Mr. Densmore, and again, waiting for final closeout on in terms of correspondence, and we'll do then the final report back to your board once we have that. With respect to going to the top of the bullets, participated in the budget preparation for this upcoming fiscal year. I want to thank Ms. Dean because she pretty much covered my report on that one. Our focus is, I do have additional comments, but in terms of working with the Resource and Infrastructure Committee and doing the prioritization of projects for wastewater, water, as well as SWF, that was concluded. And so Resource and Infrastructure is ready for our joint meeting with the Finance Committee next week. And the Finance Committee itself has developed an ad hoc committee to work with staff on the budget, the preliminary budget then, which we are working hard to be able to get on the Finance Committee's meeting for later this month. I believe it is the 28th. On that note, our two individuals who, again, in order to, so for May 28th, for the two individuals on quality control, again, the theories and the approaches that we're working with is who's ever doing the work, someone needs to be reviewing it, or have two people involved to really make sure that we're getting things right. On water quality, it's Melissa Bland and John on wastewater, and it's Melissa Bland and Jim on the water side. So for the budgets, it's Pam and Monique. And so far, Pam's been doing a lot of the analytical work, developing our estimates associated with labor costs, and some of the estimates associated with the things that are relatively routine that carry over from one year to the next. Monique has been coordinating with the different departments on the items that are non-routine, 1 year type of request. So for example, out of our water tanks, one of our water tanks, we need to send divers down next year in order to do inspections. And so that is our budget team. And you know, I think that one of the areas that we're going to get into discussions on is reserves. We have pulled out some of the paperwork of prior staff in order to look at district reserves. Right now, that analysis ties back to the audit that's dated June 30 of 2017. And as we know, Ms. Duffield is working through the 2018 audit. That's the best information that we have available right now, but we know that as we work through the Finance Committee, some of those estimates show that the enterprise funds have negative cash balances. So that's going to be, you know, that's the balance sheet side of it. Board members have asked at prior meetings about looking at the balance sheet, so we're going to be introducing that to the Finance Committee on the 28th. Those estimates that we have right now are still subject to audit, and so we have to take them, you know, with a certain grain of salt, but they are the best estimates we have. In addition to recognizing that some of the reserves are not looking very healthy, and it's just something that we have to be sort of honest and transparent about. We're working also on making sure to track the Prop 218 and you know, how are we doing, and what is it that how are we moving forward in comparison to the Prop 218 assumptions that were adopted in 2018. Public comment referred back to some of the notices back in 2014. So we'll also speak to that as we proceed with the budget. And actually, at the 23rd of this month, where your board is going to be considering a resolution to enact the increases that were targeted for July 1st of this year, we'll make sure to address the 2014 notices as well. At that point in time, I made sure to take a comment, write down some notes on that. Related to the budget also is finalizing the recruitment process for the district engineer / utility department manager. And here we did add a little bit more comments to the bullet because we were being conscientious about the current year's the budget and making sure that we've reviewed with your board how next year's labor budget is going to pan out during the preliminary budget. And so we've delayed that recruitment a little bit to make sure it's coordinated with the budget process. Bullet here on review of the 2019-2020 compliance plan for the water rights license. So that's the back and forth process with the State Water Board, Division of Water Rights, and again, Ms. Bland helped lead in the development of some draft compliance submittals to the State Water Board. I reviewed it, participated, legal counsel reviewed it, and it's been submitted to the State Water Board, so we're going to wait for their comments. And then the last one that I want to make sure, well, we are also prepping for the Regional Water Board meeting next Friday. Met with the regional board staff in order to sort of ask that obvious question of what should we be prepared to talk about? Where do they anticipate the questions? And they're going to be having some of their briefing meetings with regional water board members, so we're going to follow up on that question after they've had a chance to meet with their board members. But there's approximately 50 pages of comments that the regional board staff responded to, so we're reviewing those questions and those replies so that we're prepared to address those issues as well next Friday. With respect to the BROF contracting, and this is on the influence screen contract, the question was completion date and whether or not the contractor might be subject to liquidated damages based on timing. We have reviewed that in detail. They have submitted a request for time extensions, and it's likely then that in working through staff and legal counsel that those will be approved because clearly some of the significant portion of the time delays were associated with equipment that we specified, and the ordering dates were quite extensive. And then, of course, this year we had a lot of rain, so there was a lot of rain delays as well. And so I have reviewed the timing and the schedule and those issues, and I think that it is justifiable, but we still have to do our final review. And the point there is that that's considered to be a no-cost change order, and it's an extension of time change order, but we don't see any compensable issues associated with that. And in fact, John reported to me that the contractor did a little bit of additional work that wasn't in the scope of work. His overall report is that he was very pleased with their performance. So the delays in the completion are associated with two different items. One is rain days, and the second was equipment that we specified that took an extended period of time for the contractor to be able to order and receive. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. I have a couple I'll start out with. I think this one is Ms. Madrid. There was in Human Resources contacted the Department of Justice regarding various live scan tests. Can you elaborate a little bit on what a live scan test is?
The live scan is fingerprints.
Ah, okay,
We do that for all employees, and it was for the reserves.
good. Just never heard that term before. Thank you. Can you give me an update on the closure of the impoundment basin? I heard that maybe the end of this month it would be full, it would be done with the water side, but we've still got to get rid of the sludge, so to speak. That's
Yeah, so the two components are, or really three components, is that which we can blend and then dispose of at the percolation ponds. And you are correct, President Pearson, that the current timing is estimated to have that phase of dewatering completed by the end of this month. And then with respect to the water that needs to be hauled, the brine that needs to be trucked away, as well as the solids removal, the completion of those efforts is anticipated before the end of the fiscal year, so by the end of June. That is something that I know that staff, Mr. Green, is certainly shooting for diligently, in part because we want to get it done before the end of the year to avoid another permit requirement from the State Water Board and any more performance bond costs. And so I want to also report that probably around 2 months ago, when everybody was looking, how are we going to get this done? When are we going to get this done? Melissa and Jim also met with John Rocky and really worked through calculations and a lot of the technical details on blending rates and on timing. And doing that work effort itself with Mr. Rocky really helped to improve his confidence in what we were doing. And I think that was also reflected in the recent meeting that I had with the regional board, both in responsiveness of our staff to Mr. Rocky's concerns and really getting on the same page for the closure. That we got positive reinforcement there. And then our discussions about recognizing the need to improve the quality control associated with our regulatory reporting. Both of those hit positive codes with the regional board staff, and I know they expressed appreciation to the work that staff is doing on that. So again, the target is to complete the blending operations by the end of the month, and then all of the brine removal and solids removal by the end of June.
terrific, thank you. Other questions? Director Rice?
Going back to the CDP, does the county consider our application complete at this time? We still have more that we need to?
Yeah, it's not complete because we have to, your board has to take the action on what's going to be the project description and what are we going to seek for final approval. So for example, in the SEIR, a surface water treatment facility is identified. And so, from everything that I've been hearing, that is not going to be part of the final description, and there's no intent on pursuing that at this point in time. And so that's really, what is it that your board's going to approve for the final description? and that needs to be done. And then we'll be in prepared to be able to submit to the county. It's really then during their review and most likely during subsequent Coastal Commission review where we might be questioned as to whether or not additional information needs to be developed. It's not uncommon for projects like this, especially at the coastal level, to maybe be asked for a technical memorandum or something else to address some of the levels of detail that are common at coastal.
If we were to look at that project description and get it to them quicker, would we be at Planning Commission sooner? Or is that just only one of the things that's, 2021 is, I'm not gonna be sitting here anymore, and I've been dealing with this almost since I got elected, it feels like, so.
Well,
I'm just curious
Yeah,
about
even
the
if we were
timeline.
ready to go today, we were probably still looking around 2021 for de novo hearings,
Okay.
at coastal. I think the important point is that, well, the technical aspect of providing a final description is one very important issue. There's more issues associated with going through the coastal development process. And how is it that we're going to address those various issues? And I think that through resource and infrastructure especially, to be able to talk with those who choose to attend about the concerns that and the comments that have been previously obtained, making sure that we've addressed those to the best ability possible. That's the kind of dialogue that I think is important with the community now, just because there has been a time since the SEIR was completed. Often what happens is you complete an environmental impact report, you certify that impact report, and then you immediately, give staff direction on what to implement. In this situation, again, understanding because the project was implemented during an emergency and underneath an emergency permit, there's been a passage of time since the SEIR has been completed and before we then initiate the permitting process with the County Planning Department and the Planning Commission. And it gives us the opportunity to make sure that, again, we have the dialogue with the community, and we really make sure we have our arms around the types of issues that are going to be considered during the CDP.
Would that project description be a time that maybe we could finalize what the plant is called? I'm just thinking that might be.
Sure. We can
might be-
rebrand it as.
I don't want to rebrand, I just want to settle on a final name, so no, we're not calling it that thing over there.
It's kind of interesting that you asked that question, Director Rice, because, again, I'm like, depending on what meeting I'm in, I'm not sure what to call it either. And I've just been because the regional board is still calling it their emergency. It's a recycled water project.
It's an advanced water treatment plant,
Yeah,
is what it
so-
was originally, advanced water treatment.
Well,
plant.
I think the thing should be called the Director Rice Water Plant.
There you go.
In memory of her service during this time.
Just in memory, no service.
Would it be appropriate for us to direct the R&I committee then to have a first pass at this project description in their June meeting or July meeting or something like that?
I think June would be premature just because June is, we've got a lot of work to make sure we get the budget on the board's agenda. But to have an initial meeting in July, and, it's really your board's discretion. If you want us to start working in July directly with resource and infrastructure, we can do so. Or we could come to your board and, do a big picture flyover and then go to resource and infrastructure. As far as timing goes, I know that everybody wants to move, so going directly to resource and infrastructure might save a little bit of time. And so it's really your discretion. I just think it's important to work through resource and infrastructure because that's where, the dialogue with the individuals who want to show up and really having the detailed discussions about whether we've got our arms around all the questions and the strategies that we want to develop moving forward. is a good opportunity to vet that all out before coming with those recommendations to your board.
Okay, do we have a consensus on what we want to do there? Do we want the big picture flyover? You can't do that in June even, right? To us. You'd have to do that in July with us and then send it to R&I?
For August, yeah. So if we go directly to R&I, then we're going to save a little bit of time. That also gives me a little bit more comfort, because if I'm straight here with that 30,000 flyover for your board, I'm always going to be a little bit more nervous about what I'm missing. If I go straight to R&I, then I can vet it and I'll have more confidence that we've got all the issues addressed when we come to the board.
So you're saying R&I in July?
Yes.
Okay.
That seems like a good idea. I'm sorry, may I?
Yes, absolutely.
Seems like a good idea to get everything out there so you know what before the flyover happens, you know what the landscape, what you're after. So it probably does make sense.
Yeah,
So
I would
I'll
agree.
just start building that agenda
Director
now
Rice,
and we'll
you're
look for it.
on board with that?
Yeah.
Director Stardale, you okay? Vice President Farmer?
Yeah, I just want to know, is the stewardess going to be on board? All right. Just trying to be cute, that's all.
We'll bring the snacks.
Oh, cool, cool. By the way, I have a new updated initials that can be applied to the plant. It's the VEWTP. VEWTP?
VE?
Yeah, VE. It's a very expensive water treatment plant. Also, if I could, we're in the middle of the page 16 under administration, where it says, during the end of April and throughout the month of May, the Assistant General Manager and Deputy District Clerk worked on the following items. I think it probably should read during the end of March and throughout the month of April, if I'm not mistaken, since it says worked on. So it's something's already been done.
Yeah. Okay. Semantics.
Director Howell thought it was still April, so I think everybody's off by a month or two.
I think you ladies are really fortunate that you can be named April, May, and June. Us guys have no choice, no options there, so I think it's really nice.
Oh, I don't know, you've got August. Yeah. And maybe March.
All right, we have the finance manager's report. Are you going to do a report, or are you going to just wait for your regular business item?
No, I can touch really quick on
Okay.
the Tyler upgrade and also the financial audit if you'd like.
Good, thank you.
So about 10 CCSD staff members and the 2 Tyler ad hoc committee members met, and we had a online webinar with 2 individuals from Tyler Technologies to give us an in-depth look at 2 modules that are not in our current contract, and that was the fixed asset module and the work order module. We had about an hour-long demonstration and then about an hour-long discussion following that, and we really didn't come to a conclusion if we were going to proceed with purchase or not and recommend that to the board. So I touched base a little bit with Vice President Farmer this afternoon to find out, should we meet again? Should we just make a recommendation, what he was kind of feeling? And so we kind of decided that we are going to go ahead and schedule something. We can just revisit everybody's feelings, and then we'll plan on bringing something back to the board, and probably we need to do it in June if we're going to purchase it, since we need to get that included in our implementation process. So there will still be forthcoming information on that. And then as far as the audit goes, Mr. Bruner will be here to start the field audit the Tuesday following the holiday at the end of May. I think it's the 28th. He will be on site to start that, and he'll be here for 2 to 3 days is what is planned at this point. So then I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Director Stidle.
I'm sorry, I missed the name of the first module. The second was work order?
The fixed asset
Oh,
module.
fixed asset, okay. And right now, the fixed asset is handled as a separate, as an offline package that would
Correct.
would feed into.
That's correct. It
Okay.
feeds into both the whole system as a whole. You can do your depreciation schedule and all that kind of at a touch of a button. Right now, we do it all manually through Excel.
Right.
And it's kind of driven through purchasing of the fixed asset, which, kind of links it over to that side of the system. And then it also interlinks with the work order module to help us schedule preventative maintenance and things like that. And right now, we don't have that capability in the district with our current, I think it's called Track It system, is
Right.
not integrated with MOMS at all. So we would gain some functionality in both of those.
Okay, and on the work order module, is it more than what you've just described? Is there some element to that module that provides some additional facilitation in the financial arena as far as being able to segregate costs or maintain or track costs on a project basis?
Well, it's not project-based, it's more to the degree of we can manage our fleet records on them, so we can schedule preventative oil changes and things like that, which is something we don't have a current system doing. The other thing is the wastewater and the water groups, possibly facilities and resources and fire could also use it to track. When they go out and do a little project, they might go raise a manhole or, clean out a sewer line or something. And they will have the ability to do those kinds of operations with the work order module.
And then Pam, if I might add, because, so in terms of using the work order module on certain types of maintenance activities, we wouldn't anticipate them doing that on the routine type of items that they do on a week-to-week. But if, for example, they have a major maintenance item that comes up on a particular item, they can use that to track the costs. Or in examples where if another party has damaged district facilities, then that's a good module to be able to, make sure to
Segregate the
segregate and
cost
track our
impact,
costs.
yeah.
So Pam, when you had mentioned it's not project, because it's not a capital project type of
Right.
a module, but I thought we also saw that in that work order system in the option of being able to track costs. If, for example, facilities did some support work for water or wastewater, or one of the departments is doing support work for another department, that module would give us the ability to track those costs and sort of doing interdepartmental transfers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which right now is a
Okay.
manual item that I would have to track and do an adjusting journal entry on. We have no
Right.
integrated system capabilities to do any of those
Okay.
functions.
Are we in a position of knowing as a ROM what the cost is for the modules individually?
I believe the cost of the fixed asset module was about $1,500 to purchase it, and then I think the annual maintenance was around $900 a year. And then the fixed asset module was a little bit more expensive. It's around $5,600, I think is what the quote was, and then it's about $1,000 a year in annual maintenance. So those again are
Which
the
by
things we
theory,
need to weigh.
particularly for annual maintenance, could be translated into labor cost for the way that we're maintaining systems now.
Exactly.
All right, Lee, you're gonna put this on the June agenda. We're gonna put it on the June agenda so that you have more information and that kind of thing for us on both of these.
Yeah, and my recommendation that we include it in the budget and then we talk about it in terms of a number of the items that are going to naturally be coming up in the budget discussions.
Okay.
We would need to return this item to the board because the way our current contract with Tyler Technologies is structured is that the board has not delegated authority to the general manager to approve changes, monetary changes. So we would need to come back to the board for that amendment if that was agreed
Understood.
upon.
Understood. Yeah, I think you should. Okay, very good. Yes, Director Rice.
Last year's audit was also late for other reasons that do not pertain this year. And Mr. Bruner had spoken to me. I was president at the time and the general manager, and had offered to send a memo. Is there some similar that he could kind of explain what's going on with the audit that comes directly from him, or?
Didn't he send us a memo?
Maybe I missed it in April.
Is the question a memo from the auditor?
From the auditor, just kind of explaining the delay and stuff of the audit.
Maybe, yeah, in some respects, I feel like the responsibility is on CCSD on that particular point, because I don't really
Okay.
think it's an auditor delay. And maybe where we address that is that we do need to reach out to the county auditor
Okay.
and provide Mr. Hamilton some information on our timing.
Okay.
By statute, if an audit is not done by June 30th, then the county auditor has the statutory ability to hire an independent auditor, have them come in and do the work, and then charge us for it.
Woohoo.
And those type of situations I've never experienced. I have worked with other districts where they're tardy, and so having that communication with our county auditor so that the county auditor knows that despite the timing challenges, the district is being diligent. I think that those statutes are especially important if you have a district that is just simply not wanting to address the audit or whatever. And I have known of some districts that haven't had audits for a couple years. That's not the case here, but I think that that correspondence with Mr. Hamilton is important, and then we can make sure to include that in terms of a subsequent finance manager's
Got a little
report.
movement here. Mhm.
It's a little earthquake?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Still-
Okay, I guess
still
that's
got
a
some little
message to
waiting
get the audit done, huh?
I get, that's Jim Erb, because Jim Erb was auditor last time when we went through this. So I just want to make, it's not that I don't think staff is doing the work. I know there's a lot of catch-up that's having to happen, and it just might be helpful for the public to know that we are actually working on it, and the delays, we're working on figuring out how to get it situated so that we can have a good audit. I think that's an important thing for the public to know. And since it's an independent auditor, having something from him might be authoritative in a sense, because it's supposed to be an independent process.
Well, and I do like that idea, because then if it's sort of a joint submittal to Mr. Hamilton, the county auditor, then it'll probably carry more weight.
All right, are we good? Thank you. All right, we'll move along, and we're now on item 7A. And again, Mr. Ogren, do you want to introduce this item?
I'd be glad to do the quick introduction for Ms. Duffield, then to carry the ball. So this is our discussion and consideration of third quarter budget review and consideration of recommendations to approve Resolution 18-201-2019, amending the fiscal year 2018-19 budget. We have reported on this to your board at prior board meetings, and this is sort of the conclusion of the mid-year budget review with all of our new formatting. And with that, I'll turn it over to Pam.
Sorry. Thank you. So in this board action, we are asking for the board to approve, I believe it's 3 budget adjustments that are listed in the Exhibit A attachment. And these are budget adjustments that the board had previous actions to approve, but there's no formal board action taken in those staff reports that actually requested a budget adjustment. So we have those outlined for you to review and support. And then we've also, item B is all of the recommended adjustments that we have for the remainder of the fiscal year. Most of these we touched on in the February meeting when we reviewed the budget through December 31st. We've made a couple of additional recommendations since then, just because we have 3 months more data to review and measure against the budget and make sure we're going to end the year like we anticipated when we did the budget. So I'm going to go through those quickly for you. They're actually page 173. So the items referenced in item A relates to the general fund loan between the wastewater fund and the general fund. So that was approved in August by your board, but there was no discussion in that board letter of how the wastewater treatment plant or the wastewater fund would reimburse those costs to the general fund. It simply adopted the schedule of the loan, the interest rate, and what the payback schedule would be, but there was no mention in the board letter of how, you know, the wastewater fund could afford to pay back the general fund. So we've done some analysis and we're talked with the finance committee, and everyone is in support of paying back the interest component of the debt, not the principal, for this fiscal year, and that's also supported by the Bartles and Wells study, because that study did not project that we would pay back the loan until for 2 more fiscal years. It was 2021 that it was listed in the study as. So that's an item that we're recommending for adjustment. And then the separation agreement with the former general manager, that was done in closed session, and there was never any formal, you know, public board action that staff had written to do that, and so there, you know, has never been any discussion on how that was to be paid for. Generally, the costs in the administrative fund, which is where the general manager's salary is budgeted, in the administrative fund of that's usually allocated back out to all the different funds, general fund as well as enterprise funds. So we're not sure what the board had assumed those costs would be absorbed by the district as a whole. Was that money to come out of reserves? You know, we need a little bit of direction on how to proceed with that so we can do the appropriate journal entries to close the fiscal year appropriately. The other item in there is the purchase of the crane truck. So we came to the board in December as staff and requested the purchase of the crane truck for the wastewater department. And at that time, the financing was not approved. We subsequently came back to the board in February and the financing was approved, but in looking through the board action, again, it wasn't explicitly stated that your board would be approving an adjustment to the budget. So we want to just clarify that with this group of items as well, that your board has already approved, and just get those documented like they should be to amend the budget. The next group of items are all of the items that are related to costs that we're seeing that are different than budgeted. So, you know, I've gone through them one by one. The fire department, we are having some increase in salaries and benefits, which is related to their mutual aid response to the car fire. We are expecting most of that to be reimbursed, but there will be some costs that are not reimbursed. And so we're planning on balancing that with hopefully a little bit of additional property tax revenue. Our property tax revenue is up slightly, so we're thinking between the two items it should be covered 100%. The other couple of items down next are facilities and resource related. There was a tractor and a mower that have both been purchased. Both of them have been financed. And so we need to recognize both the purchase of the capital asset and the financing of both of those documents. And that has never been put on your radar or any board action that you've seen. The next item is just reconciling, or the next two items is just reconciling the general fund loan with the wastewater, you know, proposing to not pay the principal back between the two funds. It's just proposing the interest component. And then moving on to wastewater. Wastewater does have an additional need, as we talked about in the February meeting, that we foresee them being about $98,000 over budget in their various operational accounts. So, you know, we're proposing to balance that with the new rates that were approved back in November that also did not get put into the budget. The rate structure was approved, but there was never a formal budget adjustment made to bring those rates in and make them available for use. For the water department, we just have the reconciliation of the SWF. There's some SWF operational items that need to be addressed as well, additional costs that were not budgeted for. And then SWF capital is actually giving a little bit of money back to the water fund because of that sales tax refund that we received that was unanticipated. So I know I've just shared a lot of information. Do you have any questions?
Director Rice?
So on that last section, what you just went over, the unanticipated revenues, seems like a catch-all on these. Can you explain what that is?
So unanticipated revenues for, like, say, the fire department would be the mutual aid reimbursement from the state of California for our fire staff attending the fire on their behalf. And then the remainder of the unanticipated revenues, we're assuming, will be property tax revenues.
Because we're running ahead right now.
Right, we're running a little bit ahead.
For the general fund, and then for the enterprise funds?
For the enterprise funds, the unanticipated revenue is the Prop 218 increase in the wastewater fund. Because, you know, those were board actions last October, but the board action didn't amend the budget at that time, which, you know, it's,
Right.
we don't have to have board action to amend revenue, but we do need board action to amend expenditure, you know, our spending plans. So that's how we're balancing those. So we kind of did the table in a sources and uses format so that you could see that we were balancing all of our entries out, you know, that they tally the same. If you look at the adjustments in the A section at the very top, you'll see that those adjustments do not reconcile to zero. So that's just a matter of not coming forward and, you know, isolating the budget adjustment and clarifying how that budget adjustment will be paid for.
Okay, so do we need to tell you how to make that adjustment and where you want us to take those funds? Okay, so.
That is the second recommendation on direct staff to return to the board with an updated analysis of interfund loans for consideration with the proposed final 2019-2020 budget prior to September 1st. And so let me clarify that a little bit, because prior to June 30th is where we come forward with the preliminary budget. And the purpose of the preliminary budget is to establish a revenue and expenditure plan for next year. And then in the final budget prior to September 1st is where we bring in the balance sheet and we bring in various issues. So as Pam had explained, that these budget adjustments, and primarily the one associated with the prior general manager, that while that had all been approved, it wasn't identified how it was going to be funded. Well, through our administrative cost allocations, a portion of that would come back and be paid for by the general fund. And in some ways, that's just a simple in and out, right? I mean, you charge it to admin, you allocate it to the general fund goes back and pays admin, and there's sort of no net effect. It's really the cost that would otherwise be allocated to the enterprise funds, which is recoverable from those enterprise funds and reimbursable to the general fund. And our thought at this point in time, based on, you know, part of my prior comment, which is June 30, 2017, we had negative cash balances. There's a number of issues that we really have to believe that we need to bring back to your board in terms of interfund loans and updated balances. And so we're thinking that let's close out this year. Let's have the final numbers in terms of the admin allocations. And if the enterprise funds haven't fully reimbursed this year's costs for admin allocations, then that would be part of the interfund loan analysis that we would be bringing back in August. So Pam's done a good job of identifying what happened. The staff report, basically recognizes that some of the past practices of the district, the board would take an action and then staff would say, well, there's a budget adjustment, but it was implied and not expressed, and they really need to be expressed. So she's seeking to just ratify the budgetary implications of what occurred essentially before December 31st of 2018, and then to the extent that there might be some unreimbursed admin costs by the enterprise funds, then we'll address that in the interfund loan analysis in August.
Okay, that didn't answer my question.
Well,
Sorry,
okay, so the
sorry.
direction that we're seeking
So
then
the direction you're seeking is,
is-
we take that $175,000 from the general fund reserves, or do we take it as an allocation throughout the entire enterprises and general fund?
So right now, just as a matter of course, it is charged in admin. It will get charged out through the admin allocations. And then however the budget sits at the end of the year, if there's a amount that the water fund hasn't fully reimbursed, then we'll deal that with year-end accounting closures and come back to your board. And so it's getting charged to admin, and
Yeah, but
therefore it's going to be part of the admin allocation. Okay, so the alternative to staff recommendations is to have us charge it through all the, and expect full reimbursement from the enterprise funds right now. If we do that, there's the chance then, and I think it's highly probable, that a couple of those enterprise funds will have to come back and do another budget adjustment for those other enterprise funds. And so as part of procedural efficiencies, we're sort of like, well, why do we do that? We know what the issue is. We know we have to address the interfund loans, and we can capture it all at that point in time.
Director Rice.
I'm curious, I know the board said that we should have the wastewater fund pay back the loan, start paying back the loan to the general fund sooner than the rates analysis assumed. And the recommendation is now that we just pay only the interest, yes?
Yes, and that's because the wastewater fund, best information we have is
It's gonna
it
be
started the
red.
year with a negative cash balance.
Right.
How are we going to pay something with, negative cash? So,
Oh, I try to do that all the time. It never works, though. So then my question is, why are we paying it back before the rate study assumed that we're going to pay it back at all? Why are we paying back the interest? Does the general fund need that money so it's not in the red?
no.
Or because we already made that decision that we were going to have a payback?
Well, in the discussion with the finance committee and their concurrence was that by paying the interest only, then the interfund loan balance isn't going to be increasing, right? Because if we defer interest, then we're really going to be increasing the principal balance.
And when we do the interfund loan analysis, we could potentially say that loan doesn't need to have the interest for whatever underlying reasons, if we can justify it, that's realistic or something. I didn't realize this has already been, yeah. Okay.
Yes,
I'm
those
good.
will be the options, the options that are available to your board will be part of that discussion.
So today, are you looking for us to give direction on how to deal with the 175?
Our recommendation really incorporates it into recommendation number 2.
Yeah. So the resolution is basically to take the staff recommendations and do as.
That's correct.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
So move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Director Stidel, second. Any other, more discussion on this one?
Was there
Director
anything
Rice.
that the Finance Committee would add as the chair of the finance committee? Is there anything you would add to what's been already said?
No, the discussions happened to a very specific level during the review process on
Great.
this, so I'm satisfied that this addresses what had been discussed and the expectation.
Yay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we need to read it? Oh, I'm sorry, Vice President Farmer.
Oh, there's nothing to be sorry about. Thank you. I just want to point out a couple of things. First off, that, and I'm not a real expert in all the terminology, but I believe that the water fund in and of itself is about $900,000 to the good, but the water facility itself is about half of that in the red. So as a result, the water fund is deeply affected by that, if I'm not mistaken. I'd also like to ask a question here, and I do want to make a comment that a lot of the financial difficulties that exist right now, and I'm sure that most members of the community that have remained interested over the years in how things have happened or haven't happened, as the case may be, so much of the problems that exist right now financially and otherwise are due to previous board decision making. But I just want to, and staff, thank you. I just want to make a comment that maybe about a half hour ago that interim general manager Ogren made the comment, I'm quoting him, reserves are looking unhealthy. As I said, we have some very quality people looking at what the problems are and trying to remedy them. Is there any kind of explanation that you can give us with regard to how we can improve the quality of the reserves as we move through time, just for general understanding for the board and for the community?
Certainly. And this is a detail we'll be working on with the Finance Committee. In whether it's a private company or a public agency, when we find ourselves in this situation, it's all about structuring the long-term debt. So right now, there has been interfund loans that effectively have happened because of the deficits that have occurred in the enterprise funds. And by then updating the interfund loans and figuring out how to structure repayment over a long period of time, those long-term debts aren't in, how do I say this? By appropriate structuring that interfund debt in the long-term portion of it, and then we can, on the short term, be able to help improve our reserves, because reserves in a governmental situation like this is really our current assets minus our current liabilities. So those long-term liabilities need to be factored into our long-term expenditure plans, and certainly that's going to help make sure that the general fund gets paid back over the long term. But by essentially restructuring debt is the best that we can do right now. And again, when private entities get into the same situation, it becomes an issue of restructuring debt. And there's a good analogy there. Difficult situation, but that's really what we need to be doing. That's why we want to bring that interfund debt to the board prior to the adoption of the final budget, and start developing those reserve strategies. But it's not anything that's going to be recovered overnight. It's going to be really a long-term plan in order to improve the balance sheet.
I appreciate you giving us some clarity on that, and I'm glad we have good people that are endeavoring to get things up to speed, so thank you.
And if I might, in response to your observations on the water fund, yes, you're correct, and it is on page 151 then, where we have the summary of the different enterprise funds, and we're tracking this in a manner so that we can see our estimates for this current year, and much of this is related to the additional Prop 218 revenues that were adopted, But the water fund, we're looking at a a surplus of around 956,000, and then SWF a deficit of about 462, and SWF capital a deficit of about 256. So that the water fund on a combined basis is estimated to have a surplus at the end of the year of about $237,000. And so recognizing this interplay between those three different water funds, we've set up the new budget schedule so that we can see those numbers pop out at us, and rather than them sort of hidden in a black box somewhere.
If I could make a comment, and I think people know how I feel about the water facility. I would just like, everyone that lives in this community, and obviously this has been one of the more contentious issues in the history of Cambria, certainly since I've lived here over 32 years. No matter how you feel about the facility, the fact that 5 years after it was built, it isn't operating and continues to drain financial resources and affect the ratepayers' monies. We should seriously consider how we're moving forward with this project, considering the cost of it. And as you said about restructuring the long-term debt, perhaps the monies being spent on this facility need to be incorporated into that. That's my comment. Thank you.
Director Rice.
Just on a historical note, I had a little bit of a different take than Director Farmer on the comment you made regarding reserves not being that healthy. When I joined this board, reserves did not exist. We called the lay fund reserves, but there was no policy, and we've taken a lot of steps to bring us to this point where they can be unhealthy. They actually, there's policies around it, and you're talking about strategies, and so they may be unhealthy, but at least we have a grip that that's something we need to be working on, and I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Howell?
Aye.
Director Stidel?
Aye.
Director Rice?
Aye.
Vice President Farmer?
Aye.
President Pearson?
Aye.
And then President Pearson, for clarification, so recommendation number 2 is not incorporated in the resolution. The resolution focused specifically on the budget adjustments. And so recommendation number 2 is necessary in order to address that admin cost allocation coming back to your board prior to September 1st.
Do you need a motion or just direction?
Yeah, direction, as long as we're on the same page, I think.
Yeah, I
Informally, if
think we
that's-
all agree with staff's recommendation there.
If you want something firmer, I'm happy to make a motion, but I think that everybody's on board.
Yeah.
Direction's fine.
Okay. We're good then. At this point, we're going to adjourn to closed session, unless anybody has anything else. Good, thank you. Done.